grades K to 3, but especially K. And I'm going to stand next to her and just be using the PowerPoint with her.
I would like to limit my remarks to kindergarten, and the paper itself goes up to grade 3, and so if you're interested, you can find what I had to say about the first 3 grades at the DEY website. Okay. Piaget is the only theorist who described and explained the nature of number concepts and how children acquire them. But the authors of the Common Core State Standards never mentioned the scientific research that Piaget and Piagetian researchers did all over the world for more than 50 years. These authors are not aware of how children acquire number concepts. So, to talk about how children acquire number concepts according to Piaget, I would like to start out by talking about the 3 kinds of knowledge Piaget distinguished according to their ultimate sources. And the 3 kinds are, Diane, could you, okay, the 3 kinds of knowledge. And I sent this to Diane over the internet, and so it's 3 kinds of knowledge, and physical knowledge got shoved to the right, but actually they are of equal importance, so they should have been here. 3 kinds of knowledge. Okay, so Piaget distinguished these 3 kinds of knowledge according to their ultimate sources, and physical knowledge is knowledge of objects. Examples are the fact that marbles roll but blocks don't. Another example is that if I drop a glass, it's likely to break, but if the glass is made of plastic, it is not likely to break. That's another example of physical knowledge. And a third example is that the color of this paper is red. Another example of physical knowledge. So I think physical knowledge is fairly easy to understand, and its ultimate source is objects in the external world. Okay, now I will go on to social conventional knowledge, whose ultimate source is conventions that people make. Examples are the English language and the Spanish language, social conventional knowledge. Holidays like Thanksgiving is coming, and that's another example of social conventional knowledge. And rules of etiquette are also an example of social conventional knowledge. And in this country, when you meet somebody, you shake hands. So I hope social conventional knowledge also is fairly clear and obvious to you. Now I come to the 3rd kind of knowledge, logical mathematical knowledge, which is the hardest kind to understand. Okay. No, it's okay. Now, if I show you these 2 sheets of paper, you will probably agree that they are different. Now, if you think that the difference between these 2 sheets of paper is knowable with your eyes only, would you raise your hand? Is the difference between these two things knowable with your eyes only? If you think so, would you raise your hand? Okay. Now, this color is physical knowledge and it's knowable with your eyes. This color is also observable and knowable with your eyes. But the difference between these two sheets does not exist anywhere in the external world. Just try to tell me where it exists, the difference between these two sheets. The difference is made in the head of each individual who thinks about these two sheets as being different. That's the only place the difference can come from, out of your head. So we are used to empiricism, which makes us think everything comes out of observation. No, the difference is not observable. And a second example of a relationship you can make in your head is similar. It's just as true to say that these two sheets are similar as it is to say that they are different. And the similarity, obviously, comes out of your head. You think about them as being similar, and they become similar to you. A third example of a relationship you can make between the same two sheets is the number 2. This is not 1, and this is not 1. You think about it as 1, and it becomes 1 to you at that moment. So 2 is another mental relationship that you have to make these 2. So, if 2 has to be constructed by each person, all the other numbers also have to be constructed by each person. Like 2, 5, 10, 100, 1,000, 1,000,000. Numbers cannot be put into any child's head. They have to construct it. Now, so that makes a big difference in teaching. Okay. So the bad news about number is that you cannot teach number. But the good news is you don't have to teach it because children will construct number concepts themselves. Okay. Now, Piaget went on to say that number, then could you show the next slide? Number is the synthesis of 2 kinds of logical mathematical relationships. And one is hierarchical inclusion, and the other one is hierarchical inclusion, and the second one is order. And I'll try to explain each one of them one by one. Okay, can you show the next one? Hierarchical inclusion. Okay, and here I'll try to explain 5 with hierarchical inclusion and 5 without hierarchical inclusion. And when we count to 5, we hierarchically, we may say 1, 2, but by the time we say 2, we are mentally including 1 in 2. And by the time we say 3, we are including 2 in 3 and 1 in 2. And when we say, okay, 3, 4, is it 4 now? By the time we go to 4, we are including 3 in 4, and 2 in 3, and 1 in 2, all at the same time. And when we get to 5, we are including, obviously, 4 in 5, 3 in 4, 2 in 3, and 1 in 2. So 5 is a 5-story mental structure that we have constructed. And when we are told, would you show me 5? We say, that's all of these. That's 5. Now, ask the same question to a 4-year-old, and they will count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How many did you find? 5. Will you show me 5? It's that one. I'm sure you have seen it. Okay. So, 4-year-old count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, one thing at a time. So that is 1, and that is 2, 3, 4, and 5. Show me 5. It's that one. So, language, the word 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is social conventional knowledge. That's teachable. But number concepts are not teachable. You cannot put number concepts in children's heads. Okay. Now, the other is the logical mathematical knowledge is order. And here, counting with the relationship of order, and here I have counting without the relationship of order. When we count, we have the relationship of order, so we go 1, 2, 3, 4. And we know that this one still has to be counted. So we count each object once without skipping any. You ask a 4-year-old to count these, and they go 1, 2, 3, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, okay. 5, 6, 7, and they count the same objects over and over again. So they don't have the relationship of order. Okay. Now, so that's Piaget's theory about the nature of number concepts. And now I go to the Common Core State Standards. This one is counts to 100 by ones and by tens. Now, it's a rare kindergartner who understands what 40 means. And so this amounts to the teaching of nonsense syllables. Making children recite nonsense syllables is not educational, and it is not good for children. Okay, now another standard is, and could you, when counting objects, say the number names in the standard order, pairing each object with one and only one number name, and each number name with one and only one object. Well, I just told you that 4-year-olds just cannot count just once, and they count the same object and skip some. So it's not teachable. And you can teach children to count one object only at a time, and they can imitate you today, but tomorrow they'll go right back to their old way of counting the same object over and over. Okay, another one is understand that each successive number name refers to a quantity that is one larger. Well, if they can count the same objects, they just don't know. There's no way of telling them. Do I have time for another? Okay. Compose and decompose numbers from 11 to 19 into 10 ones and some further ones. That is useless to do. I would never do that. It's a waste of time. Why would children put 10 here and 9 here? For what reason? Because the teacher wants that? And here is an equation that begins with the answer. And even first graders cannot do this. So anyway, there's nothing good I can say about this.
We have Lilian Katz, who will be speaking about library knowledge, distinctions between academic versus intellectual goals for children.
Thank you. Okay, I just want to make 4 main points, and I'll go as fast as I can. My guess is that most of you have already heard me say them before. Can you hear in the back? Do you want to? As I usually say, as long as you're here, you might as well hear. Anyway, but I like to play with words, so. My main points. The title of this session reminded me that I want you to think about the use of the term cognitive. Everything, just about, except one few body processes. But just about everything is cognitive. You decide, if I don't get to the bathroom in the next minute, it's going to be trouble. That's cognitive. What I'm going to ask you to do is to instead make the distinction between the intellectual and the academic, and both of which have, of course, cognitive implications. But many commentators, many policymakers, and even some educators, and certainly some parents, seem to believe that in early childhood we're faced with a choice between a play-based curriculum and an academically focused approach. First, I suggest that we are not faced with an either-or situation. All young children in our programs should regularly have time for spontaneous play and other elements of the traditional early childhood activities outlined in NAYC's statements about developmentally appropriate practice. While there's a place for components of both of these approaches, academic and the play approach, both of these approaches in early childhood, a major component that, in my view, and a point I want to make today, that is often overlooked is the focus on children's intellectual development as opposed to academic. The term academic, and you can look it up yourself in the big dictionary, one of the meanings of the term academic is of little practical value. And by the way, the history of that is that it's an old Greek word, and it referred to people, men of course, whose main thing was thinking. And they would go up the top of the mountain, away from the real world, to do this kind of thinking, and that's where the expression academic originated. But it's often used to refer to something that has no practical or useful significance, if you look in the dictionary. The academic components of the early childhood curriculum are concerned with acquiring small, discrete items of decontextualized information, usually related to the pre-literacy and skills that all of you are familiar with. Acquiring this information often requires some practice for real mastery. Different exercises which often rely on memorization. That's learning the alphabet. It has to be memorized. got no real logic. And these exercises are designed to help children acquire beginning mastery for later literacy and numeracy learning. Now, I was visiting a really lovely nursery school in London not long ago, very fancy kids. And every day these poor kids had to have at least a half an hour of the calendar. Have you ever heard of that? And the teacher had this great big blackboard leaning against something or other with columns for the days of the week and rows for the numbers and so on. And I got there and they had a good half an hour of that. And when they finished, I asked the teacher, could I please ask a question? She said, well, of course. And I said to the children, well, what's a weekend? No, I said, I said, what's a week? Not weekend. What's a week? And one little girl turned to me and said, it's short for weekend. By the way, the teacher didn't pick it up. So, and I was thinking as I was listening to Connie, who's always so useful, we don't have time for that this semester, but another time. Please keep in mind the distinction between having knowledge and having understanding. The children knew the names of the days of the week and the names of the days of the month, but understanding wasn't there, and eventually they would get it, of course. But in the academic part of the curriculum, items are learned and practiced so that the children give the teacher the correct answers they know she wants. These bits of information are essential components of reading and other academic competencies. The big issue in the field, and I think my two predecessors here today have made this issue, the big issue is not whether academic skills matter, but rather when they matter. Big issue. Intellectual goals, on the other hand, and their related activities, address the life of the mind in its fullest sense. In fact, the formal definition of the concept of intellect, if you want to share this with your staff and colleagues, you might want to write this down. I looked it up. I didn't make it up. I make up a lot. Intellect emphasizes reasoning, hypothesizing, predicting, the search for understanding, and the development and analysis of ideas. And I'm suggesting that an appropriate curriculum for young children focuses on supporting their inborn intellectual dispositions, and they are inborn, some stronger in some children than in others. I happen, through no fault of my own, to be a twin, and my mother complained that I was the one born with a question mark on my face. Other things I wasn't born with, she constantly, but anyway, we won't go there. But the disposition to make the best sense you can, or children can, of their own experience and their own environment is inborn. And what we must do in our curriculum with the young children is strengthening. So an appropriate curriculum in the early years is one that encourages and motivates children to seek mastery of basic academic skills, but I'm going to add this, in the service of their intellects. The children thereby will be able to sense the purposes of basic skills, like writing and measuring. One of my favorite examples, some of you I'm sure have heard me talk about this before, is a project undertaken by a kindergarten class in a small town in central Illinois. She had to do a project because she was in my class, and she just couldn't think of anything. Anyway, she came up with a very interesting idea. This is a small town, I don't know, maybe 20,000 people. Old town, very coherent, cohesive town. She asked the children to ask their parents and grandparents and neighbors and others in their community if they would please look in the basement and in the attic and see if they could find any old balls for them to bring to class. The children collected more than a dozen different kinds of balls: baseball, football, volleyball, soccer ball, billiard ball, beach ball of different sizes, a ping pong ball, a bowling ball, golf ball, tennis ball, marbles. Quite an amazing number. One child brought a gumball, and that was a problem, but another child made a different problem because he brought a big, old world globe. And the teacher said to him, well, let me hold it. And she held it up in front of the children. And she said, well, is this a ball? And they said, uh-huh. And she said, which is part of the intellectual aspect of our teaching, what makes you think so? Because it's round, they said. And she had on the table a paper plate, a round one, like a little butter, and she picked it up and she showed it to them and she said, it's round, huh? Oh, yeah. Is it a ball? No. Why not? It doesn't bounce, they said. But apparently in that list of balls, there are quite a few that don't bounce. I guess a marble doesn't really bounce. And I think a bowling ball, I don't remember. I don't know all those things. But anyway, now here you're engaging children's analytical powers, their memories, their intellectual abilities. And anyway, the teacher then introduced the concept of sphere when she had the globe. And the children loved spitting that word at each other. And another child raised the question of the American football. Well, is it a ball? Yeah. Oh, it is, but it's not round. And another child pointed out that the globe wouldn't bounce, as I said. But another said that the bowling ball wouldn't bounce either. The children then divided into small groups of 4 or 5 in a group. And they studied different surfaces, and they took paper and they did rubbings, and I've never been close to a golf ball, but evidently it had dimples. Kind of interesting for them compared to the basketball, which had little pimples or something. And I've been a tennis player for many years, and that was a different kind of surface. Another group predicted the height of the bounce of each ball and then tried to measure it. And this is one of the main points I'm trying to make. They turned to the teacher and they said to her, show us how to read what it says on the ruler. And here is where the intellectual pursuit causes them to want to master academic skills. Is that clear enough? Yes. The children also asked for help in writing down words like height. Now, what a stupid way to spell a word. But that's the English language. It is an awful. Children's keen involvement in this investigation provoked a wide range of intellectual processes and provided contexts for the meaningful use of their developing academic skills. And that is a general way of supporting the value of good project work. My second point is that we talk, and we just heard a discussion of this about core outcomes. And I don't like the term outcomes, partly because it's not appropriate for what we do with young children, partly because it's based on an industrial metaphor. In a factory, you put raw material on an assembly line, run it through a sequence of processes, and out come identical cups or bottles or shoes or whatever. Of course, the other thing I object to about the term outcomes is that it's also a digestive metaphor, but I won't go. Let us instead develop the habit of talking about